Alrighty then. Alrighty then. Um, Hope I'm in the right spot here. I got my little microphone thing because I wanted to turn around and show you the back view. The back view is a little more instructive. I get to show you my butt too, so or lack thereof. So that's a won't charge extra for that. That's a bonus. Um, where to begin? So yeah, I mean the reason I didn't want to write paragraph after paragraph after paragraph about how to make all these parts work is just because I don't like typing. It's part of it, and I don't think anyone will read it. So I know I don't read it when it looks like War and Peace. I usually just skip past it. Sometimes I'll skim it if some guys does some decent paragraph breaks. I'll skim it just to see what the guy basically is saying, but usually just zip on by. Um, it's you like to read posts that have substance but have concision. But I don't do videos that way. So my videos are long form, and I just kind of they get pretty verbose. And you can stay in here as long as you want, but it has to be a little bit of the deep dive just so people understand what I'm saying. So, for instance, if I just summarized and said, if you want to have the right pelvis movement, target word, but you want to do that and keep your head back, then you should let your head move way forward. If I just said it that way, um, people would be, it'd turn into a bit of a food fight. People would start throwing tomatoes at my head, symbolically, just because it sounds absurd. I think actually, ICUS, right? So ICUS came in and said something along those lines. Is the idea would be you really shouldn't try to keep your head in a position. You shouldn't try to, because once you start to, I mean, because we're good enough, like with proprioception, we're good enough to try to make a move at the ball or any kind of activity, any kind of physical activity, and like get a sense of where our head is and like try to hold it there. I mean, that's the thing we're capable of doing as human beings, but it's just not something that should even be a goal or is even a worthwhile thing to try in the golf swing because it just there's really no reason to do it. Like I guess you'd look at a good player hit the ball and look like they drove left with their body and rotated good, and their head doesn't look like it gets out in front of the ball. So I should just try to keep my head still, which is just that's not the way it works, right? We can try to produce something that looks like that, but I think that was my contention looking at the video, and I might not be doing it justice. I mean, I don't think I would disagree dramatically with what they're saying in the video. I mean, what they're saying you want to see, I agree with. But I mean, the idea of them saying, well, you need to have a blend, you had to, like he was doing this kind of deal where you have to feel like you shift and then open up and keep the shoulder down and keep the head behind. Like if you try to do all that stuff simultaneously, you're essentially just trying to place your body statically into a position when you strike the ball, which is not how it actually works. I mean, you could do that. I mean, if you had a little bit of coordination, you could kind of put yourself in those spots, but you're almost manufacturing a static picture while you're trying to hit a golf ball, which is it's not the way to do it. I mean, there's a reason why good ball strikers look the way they do, and it's because it's what you get after they go through, after they make the movements you want to make, and that's the thing you have to really pay attention to. I'm going to try to make the movements that these guys hit the ball well. I'm going to try to make those movements, and then the aesthetic should be just something that happens as a result of that. We tend to look at ourselves visually when we're taking video or whatever, and we try to use that as a reference, which is you have to do that. But then to decode why you're seeing what you're seeing, that's a different thing. And it took me a long time to figure that out. If you look at just to give an even deeper understanding of why you typically see what you see when you're looking at good ball strikers hit the ball, and then you're looking at guys that are pretty good golfers that want to be good ball strikers try to hit the ball. what you start to understand as far as the differences between the two is that obviously the good ball, we're typically looking at guys that play golf for a living, guys or gals that play golf for a living. And when they started as a kid, they developed the junior golfer swing, right? Which is just to throw their body at it and the club and arms get way behind, and then they snap it back to the ball as the arms start to catch up at the last minute. But generally, they just naturally develop a lot of this lateral shift. They have a lot of coasting, the legs come out from under them, and they're like Gumby, they're super pliable. They get really open and the hips out in front, and then they drop it way to the inside and drop kick hook it. And that's the junior golfer swing. And then as they get older and they're trying to become really good, they usually try to tighten it up. And usually that means inducing more rotation into the swing and trying to trim out some of the lateral motion, right, of their torso and their pelvis and the way their legs work and their knees and so on and so forth. But most golfers, even if they started as a teenager, so most amateur golfers that are pretty good, that maybe played a little golf when they were younger but didn't play a lot, they started swinging a lot with their upper body, and they started turning immediately, right? So they immediately start to learn how to turn their body. You know, it usually looks something like this. Take the club to the top, and they start turning open to the target. So they have a lot of this type of motion, but they never learn to move the pelvis laterally. It just doesn't occur to them to do it because they think the golf swing is kind of up and down, you know, swing the club up, down to the ball, and then they're trying to get everything to go toward the target, so they start rotating, right? So they have the arms moving up and down, then they have too much rotation. They have essentially very little lateral motion to none. And that's when you kind of develop a little bit of the over-the-top move. If you look at like a 40-year-old guy that's a 3 handicap, he probably played not golf at a high level when he was younger, but he probably still started when he was a kid. But a lot of guys where you see this early rotation of the torso, these are guys that started a little bit later, right? And so they skipped over the part of developing the lateral motion in their swing. So where I would start is, especially if you're that kind of guy where you're trying to play this game where I'm trying to pressure left, but my head goes with it, or if I don't pressure left, I can keep my head behind the ball. That was kind of the thing I mentioned on the thread, was that you get stuck between, you get that dilemma where you have two bad choices. You can hit the ball doing either of those things, you just can't hit it well doing that, right? And so the key is to understand what is happening with that phenomenon when you see guys pressure real hard left, get a good shift to the left, kind of what they were talking about in the video. You can see their hips move dramatically to the left. They have quite a bit of a drive to the left, any good ball striker. But their head looks like their upper torso, chest, sternum, head, looks like it stays back as they do that. You can't try to do all that simultaneously. You have to understand the order in which things happen, which will end up giving you that look. And then, and if you want to start decoding it, you have to start at the downstairs portion, movements around your center of gravity. So the first thing you want to look at is the way the femurs, the thighs, let's call it the thighs, and the pelvis come together, right? And so they're going to essentially work like this. You have to start to learn to get this motion. So you can see, you know, the abduction, adduction thing. Abduction would be this, and then adduction would be that. I hate those words, so we're going to call it widening the angle between the leg and the pelvis, or narrowing the angle between the, so narrowing, widening, right? So I'm going to narrow the angle here between my thigh and my pelvis, and then I'm going to slide back over. I'm going to narrow the angle over here. So that angle widens, that angle narrows, vice versa, right? So this is what's happening in a golf swing when you start to extract the rotation, is you're getting the pelvis is shifting like this, right? That's a sway, right? So a lot of people will go, wow, that's way too much sway. You need to take that out of there. It's like, no, you need to have that inside. You need to have that at the foundation of your movements, because once you start rotating, it's going to mask over it all. You're not even going to see it. I mean, in fact, if you really look at how much the angles are widening and narrowing throughout the golf swing, it's actually a fairly small amount, but it has to be there. Like it's non-negotiable. So you have to learn to induce this part first, okay, before you start adding rotation in, okay? There's a very important reason for that. You have two hip sockets, and what you're trying to do is set the stage to be able to turn well, right? The only way I can turn well is if I'm utilizing each hip joint properly during the correct times in the golf swing. So obviously I'm using the right hip joint in my backswing, I'm using the left hip joint in my downswing. But in order to use those as the hinge, and I don't mean the thing that AMG or Monty is going to talk about, how people mistakenly like try to pivot their left hip out around the right, which causes early extension and you start humping the thing, and then come over here and then trying to throw your hip out. I'm not talking about doing that. I'm talking about you're definitely using it as the hinge, but the hinge obviously is falling back, right? So as the hinge gets in the right spot, because you have to move the hinge too. But once you move the hinge, it is really a hinge. It is the pelvis starting to swing up around that right hip joint. Now, obviously, you have to put the right hip joint in the right spot before it becomes a hinge the correct way, right? And that comes from, one of the things that causes that is the pelvis shifting like this, right? So people also talk about, this is kind of an interesting thing, people talk about pelvic tilt. So that means having the left side of the pelvis lower than the right in the backswing to help you get into that spine alignment would probably be the best way to call it. Getting the right spine tilt or torso tilt at the top of the backswing. They talk about a lot of it is not just side bending, but pelvic tilt, right? Well, this is the pelvic tilt, right? This is what's causing the tilt. So if I'm setting up and I want to create a pelvic tilt, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start narrowing this angle here, right? And this is going to happen, the turn's going to happen literally a split second after this starts, but this has to happen first. This can't happen a split second after the turn starts. The turn has to start, and it has to be the second thing in the series of events that's going to take place. If you start turning early, literally the right hip socket is going to start pivoting backwards around the left. You're toast. You're toast. The center of gravity is immediately going to start moving that way. Okay, it might be offset by the arms going back, but let's assume we could isolate what the pelvis is doing to your center of gravity. Your butt's going to go backwards. We don't want the butt to go backwards. It's not at the very beginning. The tailbone will go to the left only after you set the stage to turn to the right hip properly. Can't turn to the right hip properly unless you get this going first. So if I showed you what a bad one looks like and a good one looks like, all right, here's a bad one, okay? Here's a good one, okay? Here's a bad one, okay? Here's a good one. Looks pretty similar, right? The good one doesn't look that different from the bad one. If you look at the bad one, though, the bad one is that I just turn away immediately. And if you watch my head, it almost looks like I'm turning my torso like this. My head's staying kind of in the same spot, and my torso and my butt is going that way. So my torso is turning this way, right? It's going like this. But if you look at the good one, my head actually goes a little bit to the right, okay? Because what you're thinking about kind of staying in the same spot is really more the back of your neck, not your eyes and your face, right? So your eyes and your face will be pointed more to the right, okay? Because your head's going to go like this. And if this was the back of my neck, my forearm, you would see the front end of your face go this way, right? Like that. So it should look like my eyes go to the right. And if you could imaginarily look through my head and see the back of my spine stays kind of in the same spot, but my head is shifting to the right. And it's partly because my spine is going to turn to the right up into this right leg. And the only way I can do it is if I can get this triggering right before I turn. So again, here's the good one right here. One thing I think, that yellow thingamajigger back there, that's probably around my head somewhere. So you could use that as a reference. But let me do a good one here. So this would be a good one. Okay. Right? So I'm starting this before I turn. And this would be a bad one. Okay. The bad one doesn't look that bad. I mean, there's guys all over YouTube telling you to turn their hips that way. I mean, you see a lot of guys with the foot out like this, the leg starts to straighten, the foot's flared out too much, and they turn like this. It's atrocious, but it doesn't look that bad. It looks like, they just kind of stayed in the same spot and rotated their hips. Looks like they rotated their hips pretty well. They did not rotate their hips well. They did it completely incorrectly. They moved the center of gravity in the wrong spot. They moved the pressure trace in the wrong spot. They've set the sequence the wrong way. It's not going to work, right? So what you have to do is you have to get this going, and it goes right, and it's like, I'll show you right here. It's like, I'm done. I'm done. And I'm not done in the sense that I'm done with this. I've got the green light to start triggering rotation in, right? Because let's take out this angle. If I go like this, okay, create the pelvic tilt with the abduction, adduction, the widening and narrowing, and then I rotate. You can see how now I've got the belt line essentially is pointed more down, right? But I created that by going this way. So I create that, and I'm also because I'm moving my pelvis to the right, I'm moving my center of gravity to the instep of my right foot, right? So I'm starting to pressure not just my arms and club pressuring, getting the pressure trace to go to the right. I'm getting the center of gravity of my body where my weight is concentrated. I'm getting that to move to the right, okay? I'm just setting the stage for the stuff that's got to happen on the downswing, because if you don't do this part right, you understand how the pelvis is working like this, you're not going to be able to do the other thing on the downswing, which is the real reason for the video, right? Okay, so we rotate correctly, we go like this, we trigger rotation right afterwards, so you blend it together, but shift comes first, right? I can feel the weight and the pressure go into the instep of my right foot, kind of in the middle, a little bit toward the heel, but not all the way to the heel. Okay, chest feels like it's kind of turned over the top of my thigh, and this is when it starts to get interesting as far as that thread's concerned. So what you want to do is you get to the top and you go, okay, well, I know I've got to get a lot more lateral than I think. I can't just turn, so maybe I'll try to shift and turn at the same time. Well, if you shift and turn at the same time, so here's the problem. Rotation your body wants to do this. It wants to do that so badly. And that's what even high handicap amateurs do. They just spin their chest open at the very beginning and then they stall and slap their arms across it, right? So everyone wants to open up to the target immediately. So you have to learn how to delay that rotation setting in. You have to wait. Every good ball striker, that's why it looks like their tailbone goes toward the target before, just a smidge before rotation sets in. In fact, when we talk about the fact, this is all over the forum, the fact that you need to start getting the pressure trace to go back to the left before you get to the top. Yeah, I mean, I think Monty probably wants to see it a little earlier than I would, but like P3, yeah, the club's parallel, that's when you're going to start to move back to the left. But you're not going to trigger rotation. You're going to try to hold rotation off, right? So you're literally going to do this. Let's isolate lateral with no rotation. Let's take rotation out of it completely. Let's take any spine bending, cervical spine bending, thoracic spine bending. Let's take that out completely. Side bending, forget it. Rotation, forget it, right? So we go to the top, right? And then what we're going to do is we're literally going to do this. So my tailbone is falling back toward the left, and I'm just going to leave everything alone. I'm just basically going to have my pelvis turn like this and fall that way. And I'm not going to bend back, and I'm not going to trigger rotation. So I'm going to fall on the left side. So here's what it looks like. You have to get that. Like that's got to be in there, because again, it's going to get masked over. You are not going to see that, even though underneath, this is the invisible thing that's happening, and this is the real key. Okay, so let's show you butt view. Okay, so butt view would be, okay, turned in my right side correctly. This is the bad one. This is the good one. This is the bad one. This is the good one, okay? And then it's this right here, right? This motion right here. This is so important to get this, okay? No rotation, no spine bending. I'm basically trying to dive bomb the ball of my left foot. Okay, let's do it again. Turn good, right here. Now you can see, because I don't care what my head's doing, my head's going this way a ton, all right? Okay, this is gonna be part one. It's starting to, we've got a little marine layer in Southern Cal, a thick marine layer, so it's starting to pee on me a little bit. It's starting to rain just a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop this here. This will be part one. We'll make this one big first bite-sized chunk, and then we'll add part two here in a little bit.